On to the Catchment Data and Evidence Forum 2019. I'm Michelle Walker from the Rivers Trust, and this is David Johnson, and we're going to kick proceedings off today. But just before we do, a little bit of housekeeping. So there's no fire alarms planned today. If you hear an alarm, please treat it as either a fire or it could be an escaped animal. I'm told we can also get locked in if the lions escape. So please, if you do hear that animals have escaped, don't try and get out of the building. So we have got a packed agenda today, and we're really pleading with all the speakers to try and keep to time. For the lightning talks, we are going to be using the timer on the wall, so there's no escaping if you overrun. And yeah, just in each session, if the speakers can make sure they're sort of near the front, so that we can get started fairly soon. Okay, so for those on Twitter, we are using the CDUG Forum 19 hashtag. We're also using the Watercog hashtag, which is the project which we have co-funded today with. So Watercog Governance is a Interreg North Sea region project, which is all about sharing governance approaches to water management. So we are working with Dutch and Danish and German and Swedish partners on that. And one of the threads is all about the use and sharing of data and evidence to underpin that collaboration.
We've got Sebastian.
Yeah, we have Sebastian, where are you? Excellent, from the Danish SEGAS Agricultural Advice Service, who's presenting today as well. And from the feedback we had last year, we know people wanted the presentations recorded. So with the Interreg funding, we are getting today filmed. So obviously, if you've got any problems with that, hopefully you were asked to make yourselves known at the beginning of the day, but let us know if you don't want anything shared. Yeah, we'll be sharing that with our EU partners and UK. Okay, so the forum is the brainchild really of the Catchment Data User Group, which is one of the catchment-based approach working groups. We've been going for about 5 years. It's a multi-sectoral interest group. We've got people from government, NGOs, from academia, from consultancy, and it really represents a whole sort of range of data users and data providers and modelers and sort of data geeks, really, people who use and collaborate on evidence and data for catchment management. We have regular update telecons now. The group's got quite big, so we try and minimise the travel and do telecons, but then every year now we're having this forum. So this is the second time we've tried it. In 2018 we had one in Birmingham. It went very well, and we produced a summary document that basically shared some of the outputs. We did similar things that we're going to do today, interactive voting and discussions, and shared that widely with DEFRA. We've used it throughout the year in our sort of meetings with DEFRA and EA. And it really shows where the CaBA data and evidence community thinks that the priorities are around data and evidence sharing.
And we'll put that on the CaBA website as well, so everyone else can use it after this one.
So we'll be doing something similar for today and share it widely. And last year we were sort of focused very much on the 25-year environment plan, which had just been finally published after a long wait. And we asked for the sort of top 3 barriers, really, which are facing the CaBA data and evidence community in supporting that 25-year plan. And those barriers are the things that have been formed where we direct the CaBA technical support programme that lots of us in the room are involved with. So things like the CaBA data package and the technical support programme that we're hearing about today. And we also asked about the opportunities. So this was really, what can we do well and what can we do better? And the two that really stood out were around making modelling and data more engaging, and the collection and use of new data, third-party data, if you like. So we've actually focused today on those 2 themes, as you'll see later.
So the main aims of the forum are to focus on barriers and opportunities, and as Michelle said, this year we're particularly focused on. Just a reminder. This year we're focusing mostly on the monitoring, and the feedback from last year about the knowledge exchange and the building the networks is that the flash talks were really good, but we needed to spend more time with the networking. So this time we've got a room where we can keep on breaking out and get the chance to talk to the speakers after each session to improve that. And then in terms of the co-design of infrastructure, we've got a session with the agency, but then later on in the day, looking at infrastructure both from the agency's point of view and from CaBA's point of view, and trying to really get a mandate for how we move forward with both of those. Okay, so we're starting off with a keynote, which you could think of it in terms of a literary festival, that sort of highfalutin sort of thing, but it may end up a little bit more sort of lowbrow. We don't know. We'll see how it goes. And we've got talks, networks, debating and voting throughout the day, and we've all got an agenda. As Michelle said with the lightning talks, we are brutal. There's a clock which counts down, run by Annika, and it will tick and everything. There's chocolates as a reward. It's good to have a reward. But there's also a vuvuzela. My daughter's vuvuzela is here. It will be used if I have to use it.
Don't make us use it.
Don't make us use it. Okay. So we're starting with making data available more engaging. That's the first session, and then I think is it after tea and coffees is the collection and use of data, and that will go on into the third session, and then the zoo visiting if you want to at the end.
And there was a new lion in the zoo in August, so you can go say hello to the new lion.
Excellent. So if we start with the keynote, it is Professors Bob Harris and David Lerner are coming to have a bit of a reflection on catchment management, where it started and where they think it might be. So,
well, thank you, Dave and Michelle, for inviting us along, dragging us out of our retirements, being involved in local catchment management. I'm David Lerner. This is
Bob Harris.
Bob, why do we have CaBA?
Why do we have CaBA? Well, you have to go back to... we haven't rehearsed any of this, by the way. You have to go back to the early days of the Cameron government, when a new environment minister needed to get out of a hole because certain NGOs were hanging a judicial review over the government about non-implementation of the Water Framework Directive properly. And there was some of us, at the time I was working part-time for DEFRA, who were advocating very much that a catchment-based approach was a much better way forward than what was going on at the current time, which was very much a top-down approach. And Richard Bevan was the minister's name, and he grabbed hold of that as a new way forward and put forward the CaBA ideas, or he didn't, but they were developed for him. So it was really a government initiative to get out of a hole where Water Framework Directive was patently not being implemented in a way that was going to achieve the improvements to water quality that Brussels were hoping to see. So that's why we're here. Yes. Richard Bevan, is he called Bevan? I think he was, yeah. Benyon, sorry, thank you, yeah. Richard Bevan, someone else. Yeah. Richard Benyon, yeah. And where is he now? I think he's one of the Brexit rebels.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, that's why we're here.
But part of that story is, of course, that we all believe that catchment-based management was the key to making things work. That the idea that you separated out flood management from urban development, from water quality in rivers, from fisheries, was never going to get us to the right place.
Yeah. Well, I think we also, there were some of us who've been watching what was going on in other parts of the world, like Australia particularly, and New Zealand, where a catchment management as it was called then, integrated catchment management, which I still think is what we should be trying to aim towards, was being advocated as a way with dealing with some of the big natural resource problems in Australia and New Zealand and South Africa, and also, although it wasn't called integrated catchment management, in the USA, where a whole catchment approach to trying to understand the issues using the river as the indicator of whether you have a healthy hinterland or not. And I think in some ways we've not done ourselves much favour by attaching the catchment-based approach to the Water Framework Directive, because integrated catchment management is much more than that. It's about the whole management of the catchment, including economic and social issues, including air, if you like, which is probably more interesting to many members of the public, and the whole biosphere. So that's really, unfortunately, a step too far, I think, for us Brits. But it's had to be done in some places because of the more severe issues that they face. Like if you don't have any water to grow crops, then you have to do something pretty radical, which is the sort of stage that you're at in Australia. And then I suppose moving on, we tried to get in the Environment Agency some traction on catchment management, and because I was working in a science group and was closely working with David on groundwater and contaminated land issues, we saw that was perhaps a way forward for academic work as well. And we tried to set up, well, we did set up this catchment science centre in Sheffield. But
much to the annoyance of some people.
Yeah,
Let's not talk about that.
And if you go back to the start of that, when David took the ideas to University Council or wherever you had to do it, I seem to remember you coming back and saying somebody had said, why are you calling it catchment science? Because a catchment is something to do with schools and doctors and things. So I think we've come a long way from those days. People know what a catchment is now and sort of have a slight inkling, but I still think we've got a long way to go before we think about the whole thing rather than just about saving water quality or some fish or whatever it is.
So, well, let's move on from a bit of history.
I'll ask David a question if I can read it.
Doesn't want to wear his gloves.
Has catchment-based approach made a difference to the environment?
Has it made a difference to the environment? Well, I'm not at all convinced that it has, to be quite blunt, because the catchment-based approach doesn't yet have any real regulatory or financial drivers behind it. And the only way, in the end, you're going to get anywhere, unless we all become sweet-natured, collaborative people, and all politicians and property developers and farmers decide that there are other interests than their own that they want to deal with, which is quite a big ask. Without some drivers, which comes from government saying, you have to do this, without some funding, such as the funding that goes into flood defence, where, of course, they are able to make a strategic plan of some form and make decisions about what to invest in. Without funding and without a driver, it really isn't going to make a huge amount of difference. DEFRA basically palming off the Water Framework Directive to the Environment Agency and palming it off to the catchment partnerships, and then giving them, I think we get £15,000 a year for the air and colder. Well, I mean, that just about manages to run a few meetings, and that's it. And trying to persuade, I mean, I come from West Yorkshire, so, you know, Leeds, Bradford, and a lot of other cities who've all got plenty of problems of their own. The idea that they're going to change what they do for anything ecological is quite a tough ask. So I'm not convinced it does make a difference, but we're trying. And I think the thing that does make a difference is that, and it isn't entirely because of CaBA, but it all goes with pressure from the agency, pressure from NGOs to make data available. The fact that you can now get 150 different data sets is transformative. I can remember as an academic trying to run student projects And there was almost nothing you could get unless you paid for. You couldn't get geology, you couldn't get ordnance survey maps. The river network, the agency wouldn't release the river network files to you. All this stuff was completely unavailable. And so transformative in that sense, in that you're beginning to have the tools to go and have the arguments with people if they're interested in rational argument.
If I can just add to that issue about governance, and I still do a little bit of work for the Irish Environmental Protection Agency, and they have embraced a catchment-based approach as a solution to their problems, which are mainly to do with an agricultural country which has a government that says it wants to produce more food, so it has to intensify, and it has a deteriorating water quality, which is mainly agriculturally derived. So they have this dichotomy of how do we produce more food, export more, make more money for the economy, and have our clean waters. And they have got a rather different system, because in Ireland the Water Framework Directive is devolved down to the county councils. It's devolved down to the local democratic level, and the operational regulation, such as it is carried out by people in a local authority. The Environment Agency, the EPA there, is quite small, only a few hundred people, but they've been very active in supplying the data, supplying the tools, supplying the frameworks by which the people in the county councils are going to work. They don't have a big NGO network there. They don't have Rivers Trust, although they are just starting up now. So it's a rather different system, but to me it seems a much more ordered system, and I think they've got quite a good chance of doing something good there. Farmers know that they're in a cleft stick, that if they don't address some of their issues, they're going to be regulated. They have legislation that allows that to happen. So I think the whole governance issue is critical to how successful we're going to be in achieving what CaBA was originally set up to do.
So I work in China. A couple of weeks a year I go to a university in Shenzhen. Shenzhen is a city of 20 million people which didn't exist in 1979. It's just opposite Hong Kong, and it was set up basically to copy the Hong Kong model to do manufacturing in China and to bring growth and wealth in. And so you can imagine it's gone in 40 years from nothing to a really big industrial city. And so they have compressed the Industrial Revolution and the 20th century into 40 years. And it stinks. They have the great stink that London had. So they're at the gross problem, the problem of gross pollution, not at the subtleties of some of the issues around whether or not there's too much sediment and whether we've got the right fish. They've got no fish. They have strong leadership. So one of the interesting things about China is if the president or the mayor of the city decides to do something, it will happen. And the president said, we will have clean rivers. And so now they are building interceptor sewers along the 6 rivers in Shenzhen to catch all the outfalls. They've decided they've got too many floods, so they've said, we're going to have sponge city. That's suds to us. And they just say it's going to happen, and they invest in it. And so it's an interestingly different approach, because the problems are still so great, but the leadership is strong, and there is money. Things happen, and it's a different version of different to what the Irish do. There are other ways of doing it, but if you don't have either strong leadership and direction of money, or you have genuine collaboration around all the elements of catchment management, you're never going to get anywhere.
Let's get back to what we're doing locally, and has access to data helped?
Well, I am moderately techie. I can't say as I've run a GIS much in the last 10 years, but I mean, I do understand about data. I run a group called the Friends of Bradford's Becks, and we're trying to get the rivers in Bradford cleaned up and restored to something vaguely natural. I make absolutely no use of any of the CaBA data sets because I'm not working at that level. I have 53 CSOs. The river is polluted every day, or virtually every day. 90% of days you can see stuff in it. The restoration issues are as much about the social economic benefits of having a real river in the city as opposed to anything to do with the subtleties of things. So far, I've made no use. I know, for example, the one thing that I've seen that I think I could probably use is the natural flood management potential map that some consultant has done for somebody, I don't know who. But it's a lovely document, maps, that show you where you might do different things. And so I can go and talk to the drainage department of the council with that. That's been a potentially useful thing. The thing I really want is the online telemetry of the CSOs. That's the thing I need to know. Because when I say pollution, I want to know which CSO is discharging, if it is. But that's because I have gross pollution problems. And it would help us to begin to harass the polluters. But Bob, you're in a completely different scenario. So
well, I moved after retirement to the Welsh borders, so I live in the Shropshire Hills now, more sheep than people, and the river valley, the river catchment that I'm in is the River Clun, which is one of the few rivers remaining in England which has the freshwater pearl mussel, which requires hugely clean water. And I've been lucky enough to be involved with a local group which is actually trying to do a little bit of catchment management on a voluntary basis, call themselves Land, Life and Livelihoods, because, and the clue's in the title, it's more about, or as much about, the land and the landscape and the livelihoods of the farming communities that manage the land as it is about the water. But they recognise that water gets money, so we've managed to get a few projects and a bit of cash in to do a few things on the basis of trying to protect the freshwater pearl mussel. My problem has been that there is no data at all, hardly, apart from there's one monitoring point a little bit downstream from where I am. So the 80 square kilometres upstream is, as far as has been classified, is good. But it's only been classified good because it looks nice in a nice landscape and the water looks clean when you look over the river. I've never seen a fish in it yet, although talk to the old farmers and they used to go and tickle trout and all that sort of stuff. One of the projects that we did manage to get going, because I was involved with some people who were into sediment fingerprinting, was to look at some of the sediment issues in the river and really open my eyes to the problems that we have of blinding of riverbeds in those sorts of clean gravel river environments where sediment is the real issue. It's not about phosphate. People try and say, oh, it's the septic tanks because it's an unsewered area. But we did a survey. We got some money to do a little survey on the septic tanks, and they're not really that bad. One or two have got problems and are a bit old, but it's not that sort of geology that is going to allow lots of sewage to get into the river. The problem is sediment. You just need to dig down into the river and clouds of it come up. And it's no wonder the poor river mussel, poor pearl mussel further downstream is actually declining quite rapidly and will probably not survive, although there are plans to relocate it further into an area which is a little bit more suitable. But in terms of the data, where is the data for what soil is being eroded from the land and what sediment is in the river? We don't collect it because it's not a requirement of the Water Framework Directive. We're back to that old issue again. And so we have no idea about what tonnage of soil farmers are losing from their fields and being washed down the river and causing the problems in the river and then further downstream. So my issues are both no detailed data, because I'm working again like David at a scale that is smaller than the Environment Agency scale of monitoring, and on issues that actually we don't collect data on. So those are my two bugbears.
So the Environment Agency data for the Bradford Beck shows that chemically it's not bad, and yet you can see that there's sewage in it. It's got that blue sheen in it most days, and you do wonder what it is they collect. When you see my little film, if you manage to stay till I do my flash talk, you'll see the kind of problem that we're trying to spot with monthly samples. Anyway, how about citizen science?
Citizen science, yeah.
Any value in citizen science? We've got about 3 minutes.
All right, I've tried to do
two, one each.
Okay, well, I tried to do a little bit of citizen science by taking some phosphate monitoring kit out into the field, colorimeter stuff. But where I am, the phosphate levels are just so low that that sort of kit doesn't actually work very well. So I managed to get a handful, half a dozen people who were interested in going out and taking samples, but we did end up paying them to do it. And my experience is, unless there's a real big issue that people can get a grip on, like saving the otter or the dippers or whatever, something that people can see, then it's very difficult to motivate people and get them excited about water quality.
It also depends on the nature of the people. So I work in Bradford. It's really hard to get people engaged with the environment. In general, the fringes of Bradford are middle class and often retired and happy to do things, but they're not in the city, and the local population's a bit poor. You go to Ilkley, which is actually part of Bradford. Ilkley's very rich. It has one CSO, but the whole world lives there. Lots of professors, politicians. They can get the regional directors of Yorkshire Water, CEO, regional director of the Environment Agency, MPs to visit. It has a different thing altogether. And citizen science is a big thing. They're all happy to collect data. So it varies. I can't get anybody really excited about collecting data. Other people can. So it's a bit of a mixed bag. And I think we've probably
That's about it.
Come to an end there. Okay, Dave?
Thank you both very much.
So why do we need a step change? I'm sure if any of you have made a data request to the agency, you'll know how easy it is to get data out of us. We've got tons and tons and tons of data, decades worth of data in some cases, and there's a whole load of new sorts of data popping out the woodwork. We've got DNA, we've got satellite data, we've got drone data. Huge storage issues with the volume of data, and then actually getting it out again and using it is another problem. We've got loads and loads of old systems that have been there for decades that are based on water quality or fish or ecology or hydrology. They don't talk to each other. They're not based on modern operating platforms. It costs a lot to add an extra species to the ecology database, for instance. So you can spend tens of thousands of pounds for very little improvement. And as we've just heard, integrated catchment-based approach, being able to integrate the data is absolutely vital. And we want to share our data and work with partners far more. Ooh. That was unexpected. Just to remind you that we are talking about water. So some of the data that we use, it's key to every decision that the Environment Agency makes. It's key to an awful lot of people. Sometimes they don't realise it, and other times they do. So we are gathering data with direct measurement and sampling. Obviously we can't be everywhere all the time. increasing amount of remote sensing and interpretation of data, and gathering data and working with partners for data that's collected around the country. And the reason we do it is to understand the state of the environment and the pressures on it. So we've got incidents, so you're out there straight away seeing if anybody can be prosecuted, seeing if there's problems there. Discharge compliance, not just CSOs, but from major industrial premises. We've got a big problem with diffuse inputs to our rivers. We don't know where all of the problems are coming from. And then we need to evaluate any interventions that we put in. So if we have a project to improve the environment in a particular area, has that worked? So currently our IT systems, and this is extremely stylised, we've got a whole load of sources of data on the far side. That's just a limited number of them. We've got more than that. We've got our separate recipient systems. We've got a whole load of orphan data sets, which is an odd phrase, but it's ones that we can't put into our key archives, but it's useful environmental data and is stored in a whole load of ways and is quite difficult to access and integrate. We've got our area boundaries are hardwired into the systems. So every time we change the area boundaries, which we do quite frequently, you have to spend time sorting it out. We've got different naming conventions. So if you want some data on a particular river, we might have to log into several different systems, and you might even have a different reference point for the same site, because it's been monitored for a different purpose. So what are we doing? I am currently setting up a Waterland and Biodiversity IT and data programme. So over several years, we're going to replace and update our IT systems and tools. We are going to, primarily for the purposes of allowing better data sharing, better data access and reporting, not just internally but externally as well. We recognise that we can't do everything with the environmental data. There's lots of people out there that can do an awful lot more, has the time and resources to do things that we can never do. And we want to make it easy for people to access things. Open data is the norm. We've released thousands of data sets, not necessarily in the format or the nature that people want. And we've only scratched the surface. There's still a whole load of data sets that should be out there, could be out there, but it's quite difficult to sort things out. So it's a great opportunity. It's literally, I'm gathering this all together at the moment. The next few weeks, I've got a whole load of briefings of senior managers and around the business to say, look, this is what we need to do. Will you support it? Hopefully they will. But I need to sort of make sure that we're checking our direction of travel. So via CDUG, via people in this room, it'd be really useful to sort of keep coming backwards and saying, you know, what do you want, and how can we meet your needs? Not promising 100% of anything, but let's see what we can do. So just some of the data that we gather. I've listed some of the things earlier. So we've got planes that are doing remote sensing stuff, LiDAR data. We've got electrofishing. We've got automatic water quality monitoring kit in the corner, fish, killer shrimp in the middle, Dicorigamorus. We've got big data, a whole load of data layers, you know, for a small area. We've got our remote control ADCP, acoustic Doppler, current profiler. Yeah, sorry, my brain went dead then. We've got somebody going along the riverbank filling a can. We've got flood extent information. We've got DNA, which produces huge volumes of data that is really difficult to manipulate and use, but we can do eDNA and DNA. We've got satellite data. We've got some of the continuous data that we've got there. And then this one is some of the use of our remote sensing data, looking at land use, where we can identify different crop types. If we've got a problem with diffuse pollution in a particular catchment, we can look at the land use and see where the likely inputs are are likely to be from particular crop types that use particular pesticides, for instance. So that's another useful data set that we've got. I'm not sure that is available externally, but yeah, we do use it operationally. So this is very much work in progress. It is a very early draft. It is not the final product by any means. The vision for monitoring, assessment and planning of the environment. The blue hexagons are some of the sort of key drivers for this. We want to be able to access the data. Data is easily accessible and analytics integrated. We've got processes underpinned by modern technology, which is absolutely key. There's so much more available these days that we haven't even scratched the surface of. High quality evidence-based environmental plans, and we've got teams internally and partners externally who've got the right tools to do what they want. The data is accessible and usable. We're still working on a slightly less wordy vision in the bold type in the middle. There's 2 different versions flying around at the moment, and I'm sure the final one will be far more snappy, but the sentiment is there. And I won't go into all the details of the boxes below, but you know we will. This is sort of part of the programme vision. So again, future extremely stylised. We will put the data into more of a data warehouse approach. We will have more efficient systems, be able to sort of work with things, have web-based applications. We're already doing an awful lot of individual projects that will be drawn into this programme. So we're replacing our telemetry and bringing that up to one resilient system with improved data communications, using sort of 3G, 4G rather than phone lines. We've got Catchment Data Explorer we're working on to improve data access and usability on that as well. And there's a whole load of other things that we're already doing. But this is the sort of where we would like to go as part of this programme. We need some help really from you. How can you help? What sort of things do you want? Downloadable data, spatial reference data, easy to integrate data, clear standards and formats for the data, updated access and tools. You know, that's just a brainstorm that took about sort of 5 minutes between a couple of us. There's a whole load of more things that we could do that. So hopefully during the day, some of those things will come out of the woodwork. Obviously, we can't promise to be all things to all men because we've got financial resources and technical resource sort of constraints on us. But it will really help any input from today to prioritise our requirements and work plans. So just at the end, please help us make the most of this opportunity. It's really exciting, you know, to actually get the focus on this new programme. It'll take a little while to do. It'll take a number of years to get where we really want to. But if we can get some quick wins early, then that would be great. Certainly through CDUG, share your requirements and keep engaged with the programme development and implementation as we go forward. Okay.
We have got Annika France and Lucy Butler from the Rivers Trust, who are going to tell us in 5 minutes or less about the CaBA data package. Off you go.
Okay, so what is the CaBA data package for anybody who's maybe not aware? It's a curated package of over 150 different data layers that are designed to help with an evidence-based approach to catchment management. It's provided to catchment partnerships under a centrally negotiated data licence and making the data available in easy-to-access formats. We've tried to do a lot of the hard work for people by picking out some of the most useful attributes and visualising them, and also structuring it to help people identify opportunities for action, key issues, causes of problems in their catchment. It's supported by a user guide that helps show how to interpret the data, and also critically, I think, picks out opportunities to add local data into that more national package to pick out some more of those local issues. It's available to catchment hosts, clipped to their catchment, and they can also share it with partners who are working on joint collaborative projects in their catchment. So what's new? It's a complete refresh of all the data in versions 1 to 4, updating it, and also adding in a lot of new data layers. So some key highlights, there's some hard to access data in there, such as the anonymised clad data, the land cover map 2015 and water abstractions, model data such as source apportionment from Sargis and Separate, and the working with natural processes, NFM opportunity layers. There's some new data in there on opportunities to enhance natural capital and social capital. And critically, data that helps you understand where other people's priorities are in the catchment to identify collaborative action. So the water companies WinUp, Highway England's priority outfalls, flood hotspots. Wherever possible, we've replaced the static data sets with web services, so you're pulling the data direct from the data owner, hopefully keeping it more up to date. This time we've also provided the desktop version as an ArcGIS Pro project, as well as the sort of more traditional ArcMap MXD, so moving with the next generation of Esri software. And critically, the data package is supported by a new open data site, which Annika's going to tell you a bit more about.
This is going to be a whirlwind tour, but, so we created a new open data site, and this is built within ArcGIS Hub, which Miles from Esri is going to talk about later. And it's all about making the data available to anyone, regardless of whether you have any desktop software or if you have a subscription for any specialist software. So all the data that we can, we've uploaded, and we've made it so that you can view it online whenever you want to. So it's organised in a similar way to the desktop in that we've put it into categories. So you've got the opportunities and issues and things, so you can browse it through the categories the same as you would in the desktop app. And there's also an ArcGIS Online group, which you can join if you're an ArcGIS Online user, and that'll allow you to search for the data within the CaBA data package without seeing all the other sort of data sets that people have uploaded to the ArcGIS Online catalogue. We've also put in some more guidance on licensing, so hopefully if there's any data providers in the room, you can feel a bit more comfortable about allowing us to use your data and share it. And that will just help people to know when they can and can't use data and what they're allowed to use it for. We've also got a new support section. You can now send support requests directly to us in the technical support team. There's links to the catchment-based approach forums on the website, and a link to join the catchment data user group if you aren't already a member. When you're searching for data, you can it'll bring up the data sets, and you can see a preview of the data. You can find out when it was last updated to see if it's suitable for what you're doing. You can see the licensing and a description, and you can also see the download link. So we've got multiple formats which should be compatible with almost all desktop software, and we've also got API links for anyone who wants to embed them in web maps. So what's next for the CaBA data package? We're going to be looking at getting hold of some key data sets that still aren't available. So an example of that would be soils, and we really want you to let us know any other data sets you want. We're going to focus a bit more on data interpretation and building technical capacity within partnerships. We're going to do a series of webinars focusing more on monitoring and collaborative action. And we're also going to be looking at possibly releasing a QGIS version of the data package for anyone that's interested, and that's a free open source desktop app.
Hey, 4 seconds to go. Got the chocolate. Next up, we have Caitlin from West Cumbria Rivers Trust, and she is going to be talking about how she has used some of that data to prioritise action in the catchment. So, are you ready to go?
I'm ready. Yeah.
Up for the challenge. Off we go.
Okay. So I've been spending quite a lot of time thinking about how we use all those brilliant data sets and make that so that we have a prioritised list of projects ready to deliver. And we need that to demonstrate to our partners, to our communities, and importantly to investors, that we do have a strategic plan that's based on evidence. And also because invariably funding requests seem to come at the last minute, so we need to know ourselves what's our priority to deliver with this funding. But prioritisation is quite a difficult thing because there's quite a number of ways you can approach it. You might want to just focus on what's a quick win. You know there's something we can do cost effectively. To the other end of the scale where you want to have big flagship projects that deliver multiple benefits. And we do need both, so what CaBA's calling a database of shovel-ready projects right through to the whole catchment scale multi-benefit projects. So what I've started to work on is a bit of a workflow, if you like, which is for less technical people, so our project officers and partners that can help people go through sort of work stream to look at these data sets and so they can identify, prioritise and deliver projects. So I've taken a lot of the data sets that Lucy and Annika have just described and put them on our own story map, and also some on a desktop, which we've also drawn in our own local data, so things like walkover survey results. And then I've made a huge list of questions, and what I've tried to do is down the left-hand side put the types of potential actions that we as a partnership could do in a catchment. For example, focusing on working with farmers to improve water quality. And then there's a whole list of questions that we need to ask of the data. So, for example, are we interested in working with farmers to improve water quality? Well, does it fail WFD for water quality? Is there another driver, such as a failing bit of bathing water? Do the models suggest that sediment, nitrate, phosphate are problems? If so, does the model suggest that we can actually do something about it? So for each of those, it's whether there is a problem in the first place and whether the data suggests that it's feasible for us to tackle it. For example, natural flood management, we need to know, is there flooding? So looking at the flood outlines, the flooding models. If so, do we have modelling, or can we see the catchment size to suggest that natural flood management would be feasible to tackle this? And are there any issues, such as groundwater vulnerability or synchronisation, that would mean that potentially wasn't the best solution? So I've done this for all the different types of projects we might deliver. And then there's no sort of scoring or rules. I've kept this quite simple. It's just the more questions that you answer yes to, the stronger the driver there is for that action in that catchment. And then for each of those actions, it's either that there isn't an issue that we need to address, there is an issue, but really it's not feasible that we could address it. For example, there might be a physically modified water body, but it's not feasible that we're going to take out a reservoir. Through to that a project could bring benefits, that there's a small issue there that we could address, or we could make some benefits, but it's unlikely we're really going to make a step change in that. And then finally, there's a really strong driver for us to do that action in this catchment. So that whole process, for each water body or catchment, whatever scale you want to do it on, should identify standalone priorities and where we can tie lots of multiple benefits together. For example, I've done this for one of our catchments, the River Bleng, and identified that there's a real driver for NFM, there's opportunity for peat restoration, there's opportunity for woodland management, and there's a real driver because of freshwater pearl mussels and falling salmonids for improving in-stream habitat biodiversity. So you can start to think there about a real catchment project that draws lots of things together. Then I focused a bit more on those flagship projects. So across the whole project area, if we were given money tomorrow, where would we focus for those big catchment scale things? And we've identified our main drivers for our area there: reducing flood risk, improving water quality and enhancing biodiversity. And are these feasibly delivered through catchment management by the partnership? And all I've done is given each catchment a 1 or a 0, a yes or a no. So for natural flood management, is it flooding? Is it NFM feasible? Does it have a water quality issue, and can we address this through catchment management? Does it have some issue with habitat, for example, a priority barrier to fish migration, physical modification that could be addressed, is redundant, or poor in-stream habitat? And also in Cumbria, because we have the special area conservation that's specifically for salmon and the driver of some freshwater pearl mussel rivers, we've got a separate driver there of protected species. So each water body has been given a 1 or a 0 for those 4 things, and then we've just, totted those together so we can see the darker coloured water bodies are the ones where a project could potentially deliver much more multi-benefits, and that's where we would focus our work.
Excellent. So, next up we have James Matthews from Atkins talking about natural capital assessment. Okay, are you ready to go?
Yes, thanks for making this extra stressful
Very
with the
good.
time. Right, I will try and avoid being vuvuzelaed. Very briefly, my name's James Matthews, work as an environmental scientist at Atkins. Really interested in a couple of things. I'm here to talk about natural capital, but also keen to hear about some of the NFM stuff that everyone's doing. We're doing some interesting stuff around automation of site selection, which we've just heard about. So to very briefly give you an overview of what Atkins are involved in, the point of this is just to really highlight the fact that we're applying natural capital assessments across a lot of different contexts for a wide range of clients and trying to build it into multiple parts of the process. So to do that, we've been putting together a natural capital tool that will allow us to consistently capture the value of natural capital and try and establish its benefit both to the environment but also to the financial gains that can occur from changing the land use. So this tool has a value transfer approach. So if, for example, you're losing areas of cropland but you're replacing it with different kinds of vegetation or trees, what's the value that's being gained from that? And all of this is being done with excuse me, I'll skip back a step, too keen. All of this is being done with a standard library of land use values. So, to give that some context, the Even Load Catchment Partnership, which Atkins are working with a variety of people on, has done some work at Pudlicote Farm. And just to give some summary of numbers, there's been 4.9 hectares of reversion from arable land to grassland, various river restoration, wetland habitats and so on, and all of that is resulting in the changing in the land use. So how do you capture that value? So what the tool is doing is by using the sort of library of data sets, we're using open source data wherever possible, we're using satellite imagery, the land use designs for the project to understand how much data is changing, and the output of that is essentially to try and provide this infographic that tells people where the land use is changing and the natural capital variation. So just to summarise, you can see that whilst there's been a substantial loss in sort of arable land, there's also been a big increase in ecosystem services, so associated with recreation, climate regulation, biodiversity, and the key thing for us is really to be able to pull out the benefits of that. So the one thing I'd pull out here at the bottom is that the scheme delivered a benefit of £5.30 for every £1 spent. So that's what we're really interested in, is how can we show people that the benefits of what we're doing can be captured and measured, because obviously in the past it's really easy to say, oh yeah, we'll put in some new trees or we'll change the land use, but how do you tell people what the value of that is? So I've raced through, but just to summarise really what we're interested in, and part of why I'm here today is to talk to you and find out, first of all, where can we do this for more schemes? Secondly, the fact that we're trying to build natural capital into our design processes, so trying to build it into the entire workflow of the project rather than sort of it coming up at the end, and crucially helping to identify funding, because we can see if we can show people that there's a real financial benefit to do this, then we can encourage people to sort of build natural capital focused schemes. And then obviously at the very end there, just how can we more actively engage stakeholders, because obviously there's a lot of you in the room here that are doing fantastic work across a lot of different catchments, so how can we work together to sort of better improve the environment? So I've kept that well under time, but I was racing through, sorry. So in summary, come and have a chat with me. Great, thank you.
Excellent. I'll guess the chocolates. Here you go. So Sebastian, I think we've got you up next. And just to remind you that you can use the networking opportunities to come talk to the speakers and ask them more about their presentations. We will share the slides and obviously the film afterwards, and any web links that people can follow up on to find out more information as well. Okay, are you ready?
Yes, I am.
On your marks, get set, go.
Yes. Yeah. Hi, and thank you for this opportunity to come and tell you about what we use of GIS tools to implement the environmental measures as a catchment scale. My name is Sebastian Sarko, and I work at CEGES, which is sometimes known as the Knowledge Center for Agriculture in Denmark. But first I have to give you some background information. Back in 2015, farmers were allowed to use more fertilizers, nitrogen fertilizers, but in exchange they have to deliver approximately 1,500 constructed wetlands before 2021. And for that purpose, we hired 29 Catchment officers to assist with this process. And the government issues a national priority map for places where you can seek funding for constructed wetlands. And the map is based on soil type, likelihood for drainage system, elevation model, the need for nitrogen reduction in recipients, and this was conducted by Aarhus University. So, when dealing with inner pipe solutions like constructed wetlands, knowledge about the drainage system is very essential. But instead of going out and find the old drainage map, we came across this CaBA Live tool, which is used by, which originally is aimed at flood risk management, but is now used by our catchment officers to predict catchment size at the drainage outlets and to predict where is the drainage outlet in the terrain and to gain more knowledge about the terrain they are working in. This is an online tool and there's a free version worldwide, so you can even try it here in the UK. So at CaGS we tried to combine the priority map with the CaBA Live tool along with our farmer database, and we made this GIS layer and gave it to the catchment officers, and thereby they could go and contact the farmers and landowners with the highest potential for constructed wetlands. What you see in this map is a flow pattern, which is the cursive color, and the blue color is the streams, and the green polygons are the catchments. And the layer labels is the size in hectares of the potential catchment for this constructed wetland. So it's a very good tool working on a catchment scale, planning where is the best solution for each constructed wetlands. But it's also a good dialogue tool when gathering 5 or 6 landowners at a meeting and showing just this map and having discussing where should we implement the measures. So going into a larger scale, smaller scale, soil removal is very expensive. So finding the best spot for constructed wetlands is key for cost effectiveness. So the catchment officers were giving GPS equipment so they can go and measure depth of drainage systems. And they can use this information in another GIS tool, which is called our digging tool, which can estimate excavation in Maplnfo. So it's an add-on tool for Maplnfo, and what it does is it transforms elevation data into polygons, and when you have your own produced polygons, you can subtract them, and then you can get an estimation of how much soil you need to remove in order to make this constructed wetlands. And you get this table below the picture, saying how many cubic meters of soil is needed to remove. So what it also does is estimate the requirements for soil for dikes, and excavation is in many cases like the factor that defines whether a project is realistic or not. And it is also a valuable input when having contractors bidding for the job. And perhaps most important is that designing and making excavation estimation is usually a job for expensive external consultants, but by the catchment officer have their own tool, we save that expense, so it also make implementing constructed wetlands more cost effective. Thank you.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Sebastian. So next up we have Gemma Coxon from Bristol University, who is going to talk to us about camels. Very appropriate.
Yeah.
Where we are. Okay, are you ready to go?
Yeah, I'm ready. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. So I'm here today to tell you about CAMELS GB, which is a large sample open source hydrometeorological data set for Great Britain. As with anything in academia, you obviously need a good acronym, and CAMELS stands for Catchment, Attributes and Meteorology for Large Samples. This work is done in collaboration with CEH, the University of East Anglia and BGS, and is funded by NERC. So just a little bit of background as to why we decided to create this large sample data set. One of the key motivations was to produce a definitive, DOI'd, open source large sample catchment data set for Great Britain. Currently there are lots and lots of different catchment data sets out there, but very few of these are open source, very few of these cover a very large sample of catchments, and very few of these are sort of definitive and DOI'd so that there's version control. We're really looking to build on and add value to what has been produced already. So we're using a whole host of different data sets from the Met Office, from the wonderful Environment Agency, from CIFA, and from Natural Resources Wales. There are tons of different things out there. We're really looking for a data set that kind of pulls all these cool data sets together, packages it up and provides it to various stakeholders. Finally, to shed new light on catchment processes and importantly kind of allow reproducibility in catchment hydrology. So for example, if you calculate a mean precipitation for your catchment, well, what time period have you done that over? What rainfall data did you use as a source for that catchment data? And so by having a definitive source, we can really make sure that we're using the same data sets and providing robust answers from that. So what does the data set contain? So it contains data for 671 catchments, which you can see here, spread across Great Britain. Contains long time series of hydrometeorological daily time series from 1970 to 2015. And it contains a whole host of different catchment attributes, climatic, hydrologic. We have some cool stuff on hydrogeology from BGS, land cover from the Land Cover Map 2015, soils catchment attributes as well. I know that's been mentioned a few times, and some really cool stuff on human influences. All the data is going to be made available on the Environmental Information Data Centre under an open governmental licence is the plan from CEH. We're working through it at the moment. This means that data set can be readily used by anyone. So how do I think you could use the data? Well, firstly, there are these long hydrometeorological time series, long daily time series of flow, rainfall, potential evapotranspiration, temperature, radiation, humidity, and wind speed, I think. So these are key forcing and evaluation data for hydrological modelling, for example, at local to national scales. They cover a really wide range of nationally important hydroclimatic events, such as the floods in the winter or summer of 2007, big droughts in 1976, for example. You could use this data to look at trend analysis, analyse hydrologic variability across Great Britain, for example. And there's also a whole host of different catchment attributes. So I don't know if anyone's used the hydrometric register much. I use it a lot as part of my daily work, and we're really looking to build on the hydrometric register and kind of release a whole new set of catchment attributes. So some catchment attributes will be coming directly from there, and then I've spent a lot of my time collating new data sets and calculating new catchment attributes. So there'll be the first set of national discharge uncertainty estimates. So this will really give you an idea of the quality of the flow data at each of these gauging stations. That's based on the uncertainty in the stage discharge relationship. There are new catchment attributes characterising human influences, and I'm working really closely with the Environment Agency at the moment to try and release some groundwater and surface water abstraction returns for each catchment. There's also soils, geology and land cover, which you could use for catchment characterisation, analysing hydrologic variability, catchment selection, and also uncertainty analysis. Hoping the data will be released later on this year. If you can think of any data sets that are missing or want to know more, please come speak to me. And thank you very much. Oh, yes.
Thank you. Right, next we have Pete Wayne from Triage, who's going to talk to us about cadastre land ownership data. Right, are you ready to go?
Yeah, I am. Okay, thanks for having me. I'm Peter Wayne from Triage. I've been working in GIS for about 20 years and mainly in the public sector, both, for local authorities, but also Natural England, EA, DEFRA. And one consistent thing I've found is that there's a lot of duplication and repetition of spend with land registry ownership information. And so we've tackled that and solved it by creating a subscription service, an all-you-can-eat package available for unlimited use within your organisation. And clearly, there's some of the talks already today with the CaBA data package, Bob and David as well. There are, this land ownership information could become an essential building block for the rest of your work. Obviously, it allows you to answer key questions like, do we own this, or who else does, and take things from there. So it's a geospatial data set. We've partnered with Esri UK. This is a hosted feature service in ArcGIS Online. It's also available as an Esri file geodatabase. And the key difference really is that it's a fixed cost for a year's subscription rather than the ad hoc purchasing per polygon and for the title deeds. And also it's digital. It's not delivered as a PDF, which you can't share and enrich within your own GIS systems. So it's coming out of the land registry. We keep it up to date. So updates are processed every month. There's about 40 million records covering England and Wales. This is registered land titles. So a lot of processing goes on, but we do that for you. It includes privately registered land as well as the corporate and commercial data set. Because it's a full data set, you can easily extract your own organisation's ownership immediately just through a simple filter. You can also do that for all your partners as well. Please come and see me in the garden room, and I can give you some examples of this. So we've made it easy, it's consistent, and one of the key updates is that we've introduced UPRNs into this data. So as well as having a unique title number for each polygon, you also now have a UPRN, a unique property reference number for each polygon. That means that you can link ownership information with any local authority data set and with the public sector more widely, and also some of the Ordnance Survey data sets. It contains a whole load of attributes, which again I can show you in far more detail if you come and see me during one of the breaks. But as you can see, there's a lot in there. It's licensed by different areas, geographic areas, and we're very open to creating a mechanism by which the Rivers Trust umbrella can take a subscription for the benefit of all the Rivers Trust, and that goes the same with the Environment Agency and partners as well. These slides are available. I'm going to read through these, but effectively I think I've said everything in that it just gets rid of duplication and repetition of spend. Finally, just to say we've partnered, as I said, with Esri UK. We're also partners with Environment Systems. We're doing some natural capital work and ecosystem services with them. We are also able to supply anyone in this room with soils data, national UK-wide soils data, through our relationship with Maplnfo University. And the other update we've got from Environment Systems is that we have a Ordnance Survey, a OSR, an oilseed rape map of the UK, which we generated in season. That's the key thing. It was generated in season in May. That will help people in this room identify how much oilseed rape is growing and where. If you'd like to know more about that, please come and see me.
Next up, we have Tim Hopkins to talk about the Land Act and smarter land use.
Michelle, just down?
Yeah, you can use them.
Okay, cool. Alrighty.
Off you go.
Okay, hello everybody. So I'm Tim Hopkin from the Land app. I've got quite a few slides to get through, so I will get on with it. So why I'm here today, to share with you a vision of a more connected countryside and talk about how technology creates connectivity leading to better decisions, which inevitably leads to better outcomes, economic, environmental and social. So where did the Land app come from? Born out of my own frustration on our farm just south of Guildford in Surrey. We've got a 90-acre farm. We need to diversify it, otherwise we're going to have to sell it. It's as simple as that. And about 10 years ago, I was working out what the hell are we going to do? Do we build farm shop, convert barns? Do we grow diversified crops? Do we undertake environmental projects? Everything was arduous, everything was difficult. Frustrations were predominantly, as sector having to use paper maps, which come with their own limitations. There's plenty of data available, but very hard to access for the everyday user. And this needs to be done en masse if we're going to change the landscape. So, so in terms of 90-acre farm, whatever, rural estate, the difficulty at the moment is a lot of the technology that's available actually doesn't fall in the sweet spot. It doesn't enable you to easily access the data you need, design projects and schemes in collaboration. The other tools around are for very specialist jobs, and that creates a limitation for the everyday user. So land management, as many of you will be aware, requires maps every day, whether it's agri-environment schemes, updating government, registering land, planning applications, BPS, soil risk maps, etc. All require mapping, and it's all a pain in the arse. So the cost of this inefficiency is quite severe. At a holding level, it really is, imposes you to risk. But at a national level, we're really underplaying our potential, and that's a huge frustration for me and a reason for setting up this company. The point is everyone loses. It's not just the landowners, it's the consultants, the agents, solicitors, banks, government, data providers, tenant farmers. Everyone being disconnected causes a real frustration and issue and means we can't progress forward together. We know that we get fined loads, which is also a waste of our money. So the Land app, what is it? Very simply, it's a web-based digital mapping application. We built it in partnership with Ordnance Survey. Essentially, it allows you to access all the data you need to manage any piece of land, RPA data, Land Registry, Ordnance Survey, DEFRA data sets, and very excitingly, hopefully in a few weeks' time, we'll have all of the CaBA data sets as well, available for everyone. The point is it's collaborative. Working in a silo doesn't really help progress anything, so the software is collaborative, like Google Docs or any of those kind of software. You as a landowner can invite in as many people as you want. We've got a map downstairs which I can share, where we've got all the facilitators of the facilitation funds contributing to a single map showing where all the facilitator groups are across the country. Again, useful data to share back with people trying to work on landscape scale environmental projects. Features and benefits, the point is you get the data in one place, digital drawing tools to design projects and schemes, so they're templated, so you can design BPS, countryside stewardship, really simple workflows. Automated valuations, software is collaborative, dashboard, ability to upload georeferenced photos for monitoring change over time, and of course that just makes life easier. I'll go through these quite quickly, but simple use cases are whole estate plans. Estates are spending 35, 40 grand on creating a whole estate plan, working out where they're going to go over the next 10 years. Tends to be done on paper, tends to end up as a 30-page PDF. That's not really great for implementation and practice, so doing it on the software just speeds up that process and keeps the project live. BPS as well, every farmer's obviously got to do this, so we've created a simple end-to-end workflow, which we actually built with Savills, so that allows us to help farmers create the land use maps very quickly. Next step is submitting those to RPA. So who are we working with? This is actually about a year old, so it needs to be updated massively. But plenty of customers, and that number is now quite a huge amount larger. So including some big estates, wildlife trusts, agents including Savills and FWAG, government, Natural England, Anglian Water, and then we've obviously got some key partners. Again, that list has extended quite considerably. So what do we care about? Why did we set up as a company? Why did we create this easy-to-use digital mapping platform? It is purely for creating better outcomes. I'm not from an IT background, nor really from a business background, but these outcomes are what matter. These are the things that we actually value as people. This is what we're here to enable, and the software is just a facilitator of it, enabling everyone to be connected in one place. So again, Technology creates better connectivity, better decisions. Probably worth saying, the software, we've just made the decision to make it free. It's available downstairs, so please come and say hi, and I would love to show you through. Thank you very much.
Okay, so next up we have Izzy Bishop from Earthwatch Institute, who's going to talk to us about citizen science. Thank you.
I've come a long way.
Get through.
Yep, sorry about the change of schedule. I'm actually leaving early to go and do stand-up comedy about freshwater conservation tonight. So there you go.
That's a challenge.
Yeah.
I hope that's being filmed. Okay, off you go.
Okay. So my name's Izzy. I am a freshwater researcher working for Earthwatch. Earthwatch are an environmental charity who our aim is to empower people to act on environmental issues. And we're science-based, we're an independent research organisation, so the main way we do that is through citizen science. What I want to talk to you today about is kind of some of the methods that citizen scientists are using up and down the country, some of the limitations linked to them, and how we might take them forward. The backdrop I'm coming from is the citizen science project that I work on, which is called Freshwater Watch. It's a global project. It was started in 2012, and we now have up close to 25,000 data sets. So, Bob, it can be done. And it is global. Its aim is to support a global community of citizen scientists to basically act as stewards for their local water bodies. The method was designed quite scientifically to give a kind of idea of basic ecosystem health and functioning. So it comprises of some basic visual indications like bank vegetation, obvious sources of pollution, water colour, presence of algae, some chemical tests, so the phosphate and nitrate things that a lot of you have probably seen. And also, it hasn't come up there, but some optical tests, so turbidity, and that all gets uploaded either via the web or via a data sheet onto the app. So that's kind of the basic methods, and this is very, very well established. What we're finding now is since 2012, after however many years of doing it, the interest in citizen science is growing, and people are now wanting to explore their own research questions and measure their own variables. So I thought it might be interesting to kind of just explore some of the things that can and can't be measured by citizen science, and this is really just a flavour, so if there's anything else, please come and talk to me. One big thing that's of interest around the world at the moment is Sustainable Development Goals 6.3.2. We're not quite so familiar with that here because we have the Water Framework Directive, but to our shame, this is a global, basically equivalent of the Water Framework Directive, and the UK does not report on it, despite having data. So the UN are asking all countries to report on dissolved oxygen, conductivity, nitrogen, phosphorus and pH. There's increased interest from governments to measure some of these variables, particularly using citizen science as a resource-saving measure, which is a little sad that that's the only value they see in citizen science, but there you go. A lot of these are very easy to measure. Dissolved oxygen can be challenging. We are currently experimenting with different ways that citizen scientists might measure dissolved oxygen. And there are some that can be done by taking a water sample and sending it back to a lab. That's less engaging for citizen scientists. They're less likely to be motivated because they don't get that kind of instant result. So we're now exploring some in situ tests for kind of other things like chemical oxygen demand, which might line up. In the UK, we've actually got a really good scientific basis for citizen science, for various different citizen science, particularly around community restoration efforts. And as communities are getting more involved in restoring landscapes, they're getting more interested in these kind of methods. So the Riverfly Partnership is an obvious one. We've got a great scientific basis for that. There's also geomorphological indicators that citizen scientists can measure using MORPH, Modular River Survey. The challenge with a lot of this is getting all of those variables together in one place in a way that citizens can understand. Finally, Ilkley Wharf, lots of people are really interested in measuring coliforms and E. coli. This is a big challenge for citizen scientists. Even kind of established labs can't get an instant result, and therefore it's very, very difficult to engage citizen scientists with it. There are developments happening. Dublin City University have developed something that will give a result in 2 minutes. It's not yet ready for citizen scientists, but it is out there. So,
Okay, so in a last-minute change programme, we have got Gareth Old from CEH, who is talking about natural flood and pollution.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, go
okay.
ahead, Gareth.
So I'm tempted to forfeit a chocolate to hear David play his instrument, but we'll see. Okay, right, and it was my fault for this amendment to the programme, but here we go. So I'm Gareth Old from the Centre for Ecology and Hydrology, and I want to introduce to you the natural flood and pollution planning tool that I have developed with some funding from the Natural Environment Research Council, innovation funding, and also a large agricultural sustainable land use project. Now, as I'm sure you all know, natural flood management interventions come in many forms, and some of these are illustrated across the centre of this slide. So they may involve tree planting, reconnection of floodplains, interventions in channels. So they're hugely varied. And now, as these are delivered, what they do is they either typically conserve, restore, or mimic natural processes, which either reduce flooding, and ideally they also reduce diffuse pollution. Now the big challenge comes when you deliver these as to where you put them. And there are a number of approaches which are taken at the moment to do that. Opportunity maps are widely used, but the problem with these is they often look at opportunities in the upstream catchment, but they will rarely tell you what the benefit is downstream in terms of flood risk. Alternatively, you might undertake hydrological and hydraulic modelling. And although this might give you more definitive answers of flood risk reduction, the problem is that they can be very costly and time-consuming. So what we have done here is develop a tool which tries to bridge some of the complexity of detailed modelling and the use of spatial data sets in finding places where you might put these interventions in a catchment. And the sorts of information we take out of our detailed hydrological models, the gridded models that we've developed in CH on a national scale, are things like the estimates of runoff from points in the landscape and their travel times to a point downstream. So these are bits of information we can usefully extract. And spatial data, as I'll show in a moment, is numerous, and you've seen that through many other presentations already. But by bringing this together, what we want to do here is produce a mechanism where we can target interventions to not only reduce flood risk downstream, but to also reduce diffuse pollution and make the most of ecological benefits and also reduce financial impacts. So don't worry too much about the detail here, but what I want to show you is just to give you a feel for this tool that we've developed. And this is the main interface page, which Dave had some first-hand experience of it when he came to visit us, but we're taking this forward at the moment. And there's a couple of aspects I want to point out. So in the bottom left-hand corner, we have exploring catchment information. For a downstream point, you can call on many data sets to understand your catchment, what the land use is, what the hydrology is. So you might look at, for instance, the amount of woodland in the catchment as an example, and see what the current resilience is to flooding. It also gives you an insight into the potential for natural flood management. So are there big floodplain areas that are disconnected, for instance? So that's all exploring your catchment. But then what this does then is access some of these data sets already mentioned and allow you to do some targeting. So the top left box is where you really start screening your catchment in various ways. So what you can firstly do is say, which points in my catchment really deliver water to the flood peak? And the top right gives you a typical hydrograph. And there you can see the squares which really deliver water on the flood peak. And then you might say, which of these give high runoff? So then you can screen them again and say, okay, well, we'll focus on the ones which give lots of water and it'll contribute to the peak. And you might say, which ones have high soil erosion, for instance? So then you can do that and mitigate soil erosion at the same time. Once you have those squares, you can on the bottom right, you can reduce the runoff from those cells and see what difference that might make to a typical hydrograph. And the sort of data sets that we can put in to use for screening are numerous, and they're open-ended into the future, so we can feed in other data sets. But I just want to highlight some that we currently have interest in, either already implemented or which we are going to do so. And some of the CH landscape data sets are particularly useful. So we have the land cover map, which many of you will be familiar with. We also have derivations of that. So we have the CH land cover plus pesticides, fertilizers, and the crop map. So these really give us an insight into diffuse pollution benefits of targeting certain areas. Then we also have other landscape data sets which are included, and these might include things like the agricultural land classification, priority habitat, soil erodibility. So again, allowing us to look at the economic impact of doing things and the potential for ecological benefit and diffuse pollution. Oh yeah, that's it. And that is it. I almost got it. Okay, cheers. Thanks.
Fabulous, okay, and you can follow up with the links afterwards, but okay.